We often hear about America's opioid crisis and the fight to get those drugs off the streets.
But it's not just a battle in our communities. Our prisons are affected too. In this Target 8 investigation, KOMU's Siobhan Harms explains what she found after analyzing nearly 250 inmate autopsies. Siobhan.
Yeah, Taylor, Evie, 511 inmates died in Missouri correctional facilities over the last 4 years. Almost half of those deaths were unexpected. When a death is unexpected, the state requires an autopsy. And from these autopsies, I found that the vast majority of deaths were natural, but a striking percentage of the deaths were preventable. More than 22% of the deaths were related to illegal drugs, and fentanyl contributed to 80% of those drug-related deaths.
When I got to prison, it was the first time I ever saw heroin. I never saw heroin until I went to prison. And I never seen nobody stabbed to death until I went to prison.
Clifton Davis has spent most of his adult life in maximum security prisons.
And I served 26 years and came home at 43 in 2022.
He was sentenced to 40 years for assault and robbery when he was 17 years old. While in prison, Davis met many people, including his friend Deshaun Johnson.
He was an artist. He was from St. Louis, Missouri. We both were juveniles when we got locked up. That's how we met. We was teenagers. We met in the Fulton Diagnostic Center, and then over the years, we just built a relationship.
That close relationship ended when Johnson died in 2020 at 46 years old. His death was ruled an accident, acute fentanyl intoxication.
He died in a cell. But he was in there for hours before he got medical attention.
Like many of the autopsies, Johnson's did not indicate where in the facility he was at the time of his death. Between 2021 and 2024, specific location was included in only 58 of the 113 autopsies where drugs were a determined cause of death. 24 of those 58 reports provided additional details, showing 5 inmates were in solitary confinement and 19 were with others. The Department of Corrections says an inmate should be cleared by medical prior to being placed in solitary. But Davis says the system is not foolproof.
You know, if you don't have if the right nurses or guards or whatever don't come and they see you having an episode, they just lock you in the room and come back and just be a dead body in there.
Between 2021 and 2024, 91 inmates died from fentanyl.
For the most part, the drugs that we're dealing with would be synthesized drugs such as fentanyl, synthetic cannabinoids, sometimes methamphetamine that's liquefied, and it's all sprayed on paper. After that paper is dried, it can be sent in a piece of paper the size of your driver's license.
You just pay a guard to bring it into you. A guard, a caseworker, a contract work, anybody that comes inside the prison.
Just last month, an employee at the Eastern Reception Diagnostic and Correctional Center in Bonne Terre pleaded guilty to smuggling drugs into that maximum security prison.
Like any organization, there certainly could be some bad actors, but what I will say is we really work hard to hold them accountable. Anyone that's trying to bring drugs into our facility, we're going to pursue prosecution and we're going to catch them.
The Department of Corrections attributes the decline to a 3-tiered strategy: prevention, identification, and exclusion. At KOMU 8 News at 10, hear from the department's directors about efforts to reduce drugs in prisons and what the department is still looking to improve on. In the studio, Siobhan Harms, KOMU 8 News.
Earlier tonight, we told you how more than 22% of unexpected deaths in the Missouri Department of Corrections are drug-related. KOMU Siobhan Harms investigates what the department has done to keep drugs out of Missouri prisons.
In part 1 of my report, I told you about Clifton Davis, a formerly incarcerated man from Columbia whose friend died from a fentanyl overdose in prison. He and others are drawing attention to drug issues in prison, an issue the Department of Corrections says is complex and hard to tackle.
My name is Michelle Smith. I founded an organization called Missouri Justice Coalition.
Smith knows the system firsthand. She was formerly incarcerated.
Drug proliferation within Missouri Department of Corrections today is one of the most dire emergency issues going on, and sadly not enough people in positions of power are paying attention.
DOC Director of Adult Institutions Miles Strid has been with the department for over a decade and has worked in nearly every role.
When I was a corrections officer, the type of drugs you were looking for would be, powdered cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, maybe marijuana and the leafy substances. That's not what we're facing these days.
Now, he says the department is tackling synthesized liquid drugs that are applied to paper.
A piece of paper the size of your driver's license. And a piece of paper that size could have hundreds of doses, some of which may be lethal on it.
The department provided these photos, showing drug-contaminated paper recently confiscated in Missouri prisons. The paper looks ordinary, making it incredibly difficult for officials to identify what paper is contaminated and what paper isn't.
This wasn't just a Missouri problem.
In July 2022, the department changed mail procedures. Inmates can now only receive and send digital mail, with few exceptions, like for privileged client attorney mail. But even that mail can be contaminated.
As a department, our first priority has to be to provide the offenders access to private communication with their legal representation.
Strid says the department has been speaking with attorneys to workshop a potential solution. But drugs aren't just coming in through the mail.
Corrections agencies across the country have been dealing with far more complex criminal activity than they did in the past.
And he says it's hard to pinpoint where most of the drugs are coming from.
We've had drugs come in on semi-trucks from vendors that are providing materials to keep our facilities running. We have drugs, we've had people park on the side of highways, sprint towards our fences and throw them over. We've had people put them on drones, fly them over our perimeter and drop them.
Last year, the department stepped up its efforts to keep drugs out of prisons, installing body scanners across all facilities, and establishing a new division of Adult Institutions Investigations Unit.
Their role really is to try to identify people in the community and these organizations that are trying to get drugs into our facilities. Try to identify people in our facilities that may have drugs or are using drugs and hold them accountable.
The hope is that this will help decrease drug-related deaths even more. But Strid says he wants to be clear. No drug-related death is acceptable.
Men and women incarcerated in Missouri prisons, they're our neighbors. Oftentimes they're our family members as well. And so anytime we have a death in corrections, it's impactful both to the offender population and, believe it or not, to our staff.
Strid says the department is always open to feedback. He encourages people to reach out to the Constituent Services Division of the Corrections Department. You can find that on KOMU.com. In the studio, Siobhan Harms, KOMU 8 News.